Hello, dear friends. Today we have a International People's Unity Club podcast program face to face with Alexander Kazakov. That's myself. As a guest, we have a great speaker today, very interesting person and individual, Earl Rasmussen, retired lieutenant colonel who served more than 20 years in the U.S. Army and works as an international consultant in D.C. Hello, Mr. Rasmussen. How are you today?
Hello, nice to be with you.
Здравствуйте, большое спасибо, хорошо быть с вами. I want to start from the most interesting, intriguing, popular, and probably a noisy person in the whole world. You might be surprised, but that's Mr. Donald Trump. Often we ask a question, why you keep speaking about Trump? Why you keep telling or discussing Trump's personality? One reason only. This is a person who gives an international agenda starting from January 2026. And what I would like to ask you offer your first topic for discussion that it's obvious for everybody that Trump, with his activities, with his wording, whatever he says and does, if we can say so, he breaks the balance of power, the balances in the whole world. At the same time, at the broken balances, there could be other balances, new powerful lines. Potential conflicts may arise. In Russian theater, Anton Chekhov, he has a famous phrase: if in the first act, the first part, you have a rifle on the wall, then in the second part or in the end of the drama, it'll for sure shoot. So, or it will for sure fire. So, do you think it would happen that Trump breaks fundamental balances of the powers in the world? Would that bring it to new conflicts and could be a possible a global conflict? On one side, Trump tried to stop it, but with his wording, he engages in the conflict.
Yes, President Trump is a very complex individual. And he definitely shakes the foundations. The I think he does not like Europe. He also feels very he likes a big show and wants to put out a big public relations show. And he likes quick action, quick success. I don't necessarily think he thinks through the strategic long-term implications and what other factors may occur. The It's his nature. He's chaotic. I think that's part of his style. I wouldn't call it diplomacy, what we would historically think of diplomacy, but it is. He has a lot of rhetoric. He aims in different directions. I do think he believes in America first, and doesn't necessarily, and he feels, I think, especially on the NATO side, I think he feels Europe is getting a free ride. And so I think he also realizes that China is a major competitor. And so I think, and maybe not a armed forces type of conflict, but I definitely see him in the economic competition area. So you'll see a lot of the policies, the pulling back from NATO, at the same time keeping his hand there in some way. You see the global war on trade with the tariffs. You see him threatening everyone around the globe. Also kind of taking on a Monroe Doctrine 3.0 and expanding it here, kind of really throwing out international law and treaties out the window and setting his own policy based on his own morality. So it's a very complex negotiating that. The Europeans have been kind of, I think they're very flustered. They don't know which direction to go. Unlike you see, Russia and China are they're standing back. Russia's got their primary objectives in Ukraine right now, as well as around the world, are keeping their hands on. China's sitting back patiently. I think they're watching things unfold. And much more, both countries are much more patient, much more strategic in their visions of the direction. And they're appeasing. There's opportunities, and I think Mr. Trump realizes it too. There are economic opportunities from a partnership with Russia, as well as trade and partnerships with China. So from a business perspective, he realizes there's a play there. I don't necessarily think he realizes implications of the explosive nature of the Middle East. Very explosive. I think he gets wrong advice as far as the military capabilities of Iran and how that could impact the entire region. Also, I think he feels he can own Canada, Greenland, South America, and that doesn't necessarily fit with current politics and current attitudes of internationally or with the people of those countries as well. And that could become a stumbling block as well. I mean, Venezuela was not a major drug center, but it has a lot of oil, although very difficult to extract and process, and it has a lot of mineral wealth too, which he has a keen interest in. So I think there's economic interests in Venezuela, in other countries in the Central America and the Caribbean, Canada and Greenland, also very resource rich. And so he sees where the resources are very beneficial from an economic perspective for although he doesn't justify that as the reasons, I think that has a primary reason in. Also, Greenland you can play more of a role in the northern trade routes, have more influence in that. So I think he sees that as an opportunity also. But yeah, he's more looking from an economic perspective, I think, but he's using the military force or threat of force more as a negotiating tool. And although I think he's being misled as far as as far as U.S. military power. I don't think he fully grasps the capability of Russia, China, and even Iran in that area, and the U.S. And as a result, I don't think it's as an intentional move, but as an accident, you could see conflict evolve in greater area across a region, or even across multiple regions at one time, which makes it very, very dangerous.
I totally agree with you. How you evaluated Trump, I try to prove from my point of view that if we just not taking a current position but a future outlook, Trump quite a strategic person. He has an understanding of what he wants to reach, and another point is that his desires might be looking unrealistic, but he shows even in this year that he is ready to do almost to perform miracles or do unexpected moves. And I was speaking with your colleagues from United States, which were assured pro-Trump people and now kind of disappointed in Trump, that Trump has promised to finish all wars, though he's starting all wars. But if you take the military analysis, he hasn't launched a war. There is no war in Venezuela, no war in Greenland, no war in Iran. That's a rare case when Trump said he finished the war with a military strike in Iran. But that's true, you know, the war is over with. So it's an original way, a special way to finish the war with some kind of power. So to start a war with Trump, it's kind of dangerous.
Вы говорите, что Трамп возможно не имеет.
So maybe what you said is right, that Trump doesn't have good quality information. And also he's on different vectors of activity, different directions. Because on the other side of his he's not playing squash, he's playing tennis. There's another player on the other side. He plays with a partner, and the reaction of another partner, you know, we will never guess. Sometimes we don't even know. You know probably better as a specialist that military accident happens out of nothing. Nobody wanted it, but it started. So his activities, he's also that's against his will. He is he's a peacemaker. He doesn't like to fight. It can bring a conflict outside of his will, and people can use the weakness, White House included.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. I don't think he wants a war, but he's not afraid to use military strength or a show of military strength as a mechanism to shape the international discussion and to get what he wants. And I think he knows what he wants. I agree with that as well. And perhaps I don't know how far out he's actually looking, but it's a good comparison to look at it from a tennis player, maybe basically a couples tennis playing match, where and I don't know if he knows, his partner mostly is the West, but with the Europeans, but I think he gets very frustrated with them on their moves, perhaps. And of course, they're taken off guard by his moves, and he's very determined. He's decisive. But at the same time, I don't think, and perhaps he gets some intelligence, different perspectives, and seems to, even with his first term, seem to align with those that I don't necessarily agree with. I think he got some wrong advice in the first term, and definitely on the second term, there's different elements of that too. So yes, it's but I think he does, looking at it from a longer term to some degree, but he very interested in short term and himself being in the middle of everything. Whether he really is in the middle of everything or not, but he wants to be in the middle of everything.
That's true. He wants to be in the middle of every. That's his central role. That's his reality. And to fix him in some kind of way, it probably will not take place. So you just kind of have to count that in your own plans. So you have mentioned about Monroe Doctrine. We know that well in Russia. And with some colleagues, we have checked that people that are educated. They know about American history more than Americans themselves, because the speech of President James Monroe, right, 200 years ago, it started from Thanksgiving to the Alexander the First, the Emperor of Russian Federation. That was his first thing. Then he laid down his doctrine. But when I first heard from Mr. Trump the declaration about Monroe Doctrine, counting in that the world is not just complicated, but the world is truly polycentral.
Ведь
Trump cannot
Трамп не
avoid
может не
understanding
понимать,
that
что
if
если он предъявляет
he claims
претензии на
something,
что-то, по крайней
other
мере у
states,
других великих
great
держав,
states, have the same
есть
right.
такое же право.
More than
Более
that,
того,
if he
когда он
speaks
говорит
about
про
United
Соединенные
States,
Штаты,
he
он
practically
фактически
calling
призывает
others
остальных,
do the
делайте
same
то же
if you
самое,
can.
если сможете.
In a
И в
connection
этой
to that, I
связи
got
у
a
меня к вам
question to
вопрос,
you
как
as a politician
политологу
and a
и военному.
military individual.
Я
You
думаю, что вы
probably
лучше,
know
чем
more
советники Трампа,
than the
потому
allies
что
of
они мне тоже
Trump
не
or
нравятся.
his
Вы
advisors. I don't
знаете
like him either.
соотношение сил, по крайней мере, военных
But if you take a look
с
at Russian
Россией
power
и
and Chinese
Китаем.
power, these
Ну,
two
как
great
минимум, у
states,
этих двух стран, ну,
Trump
собственно, Трамп
also
тоже считает эти
considers
две
them
страны
great
великими
states.
державами,
They have
есть
a
право
right
на
to claim their own
предъявление своих
claims,
претензий.
terms.
Не
Would it
получится ли
be
так,
that
что в ответ
to
на
answer
американскую
Americans'
доктрину Монро
Monroe's
Трампа
doctrine, Putin and
Путин
Xi
и Си
Jinping would
Цзиньпин
claim
предъявят
Russian
русскую
doctrine
доктрину
and
Монро
doctrine
и
from
китайскую
China?
доктрину
We've
Монро? В
had
истории
cases
такое
like
уже
this, and
было. В 20
in
веке
20th century
существовала
we had
японская
Japanese
доктрина
doctrine.
Монро.
If that takes
Если
place,
это произойдет,
how would
как на это
Trump react to
отреагирует
it? He
Трамп?
said,
Он
"Oh,
скажет,
great
отлично,
game,
молодцы, вот
boys.
сейчас мы все
Let's do it all
вместе.
together."
Или
Or he will
он
remember
вспомнит
yesterday
вчерашний
when
день,
America
когда
was
Америка
the only dominating
единственная
power and state in the
доминирующая
world.
держава в мире.
Would it bring to
Это
partnership
приведет к
or
сотрудничеству
would it bring to
или к
conflict?
конфликту?
That's a good question. The if we look at the national security strategy they've put up,
У
it
меня
talks
перевод
about
пропал.
more concentration in the Western Hemisphere, the U.S. role in that area. It's our area that's basically frames the Monroe Doctrine, as he calls it, Monroe Doctrine 3.0. But at the same time, he also mentions, I think he tones down the adversarial perspective with China and Russia, but at the same time, he does also emphasize the need to prevent regional powers gaining supremacy. So he really kind of, in some way, it's kind of a rewording of the Wolfowitz doctrine. So which frames are the direction we've been in the last 20 years. So it's a little bit of a shift, more heavy on the Western side, more recognition of a competitive nature. I think he realizes that China and Russia, other great powers, are going to want to have a regional perspective as well. But at the same time, he doesn't want them too competitive.
Well, then
Ну, тогда
I
я не
cannot
могу
avoid a
не
question.
задать вопрос,
Since
поскольку
it
это, по крайней
in
мере,
Russia
в России довольно,
has
довольно
been
давно
discussed for
уже
a long
обсуждается и
time
дискутируется как
how the peace, as a
мирная
peace
перспектива.
perspective, if Trump,
Если
as you
Трамп,
think,
как пишет поэт, с
respects
уважением относится к
Chinese and Russian
статусу
statuses
Китая
as
и
great
России как
powers
равных
or equal players at the
игроков
world
на
arena,
мировой арене,
then we
то
have to
тогда надо
consider
предположить, что
that to solve
решив
current
текущие
problems,
проблемы,
including
в том числе
Ukrainian conflict,
украинский конфликт,
these three
эти три
states
державы
would
должны
sit at
сесть за
one
один
table
стол
of
переговоров
negotiations and
и
have new
договориться о
rules,
новых правилах.
agreement for new rules,
То, что
what
называют
we call a Yalta version 2.
Ялтой 2.
I think that is a good perspective, and I think that's something that needs to be done. And notice he actually has, I mean, under the Biden administration, they basically pretended like Russia wasn't even there. So here we have Trump, who has reached out in a dialogue to Putin several times now, and also the Xi Jinping, and even if you remember his first term, he reached out to North Korea. So he reaches out to adversaries as well and has some discussions with them. I do think he's potentially influenced by the Israeli side. Obviously, a lot of his big donors are from that side. I don't know how that plays with Iran. I think there should be a dialogue with Iran, perhaps, too. which I think would be good. Iran is a regional power in that area, whether they want to accept it or not. And I think Israel and Iran needs to talk and come to an agreement there. Perhaps he can play a role in that also. But yeah, I think there's a realization that there needs to be a grand table, if we want to call it, together to promote a greater dialogue and restructure the rules. The rule based, really need to look at more of a global security agreement. You look at Europe and in a really on Eurasia side, why do we have areas or forces outside of Eurasia in the Eurasia side? Or perhaps you look at a greater European security framework. But we need to look at why was NATO formed. I mean, early on they talked about, to keep Germany down, Russia out, and the U.S. in. So it's I think one of the first Secretary Generals made that comment. So it's really has more of a role in that than it did in security per se. I think the West kind of led and helped create the Cold War, and they seem to be going in that direction now too. Except we're seeing dialogue at least occurring now with President Trump. So it's hopeful we don't get to that completely. But yet, yes, does he still want to be the top one on the block, the lead kid? Even though I think he needs to look at it more of a co-equal type of a basis and have a more of a joint dialogue. Everyone knows that everyone has different interests. We all have strategic different interests. We want to look out after our people as well. And he needs to understand it. And I think he does underneath, but he's a New York construction person, developer type person. And that is very combative. So, and you see that in his personality a lot too. He grew up in that, his father was that. So he grew up in that environment. So a lot of it is the New York aspect coming through there also. But I think underneath he realizes the importance of a strategic balance that has to take place. Maybe I'm naive in that, and I don't necessarily agree with some of his policies or how he's doing it, but yeah, it's definitely a unique style. I think the other side you kind of touched on is he's losing support here, and a lot of times people are upset with our foreign adventures, and yet we seem to we haven't addressed healthcare, a horrible issue here in the U.S. That we have quality healthcare, but the cost is outrageous. We have an economy that I think is teetering. Stock market's doing okay, but I think we're on the edge. Who knows where that go? Inflation is higher than what's being projected. So the average person sees that as well. So they feel betrayed in some way. And so he has to, and then we have the whole Epstein episode going on, which is distracting from his agenda as well. So he has other things, and the foreign adventures kind of distract away from the domestic issues that are going on. And so there's a role in that area also. Although I'm a believer that foreign policy plays a huge role, whether that's domestic or otherwise. So it'll somehow will echo back into domestic, whether that's industrial production, whether that's trade or whatever. So it's yes, and so we'll see. We need some efforts on the trade area, and of course his area is to launch a global war on trade first, and then we kind of negotiate between things, and it's that's his art. Rather than a diplomatic solution, he's doing a real estate deal in New York.
I would like to comment your words concerning internal foreign policies. We understand the number of problems inside the United States for Trump. A lot of people keep saying that the United States is at the border of the civil war. Some people say that the country is divided. We see that, we understand that. But don't you think that foreign affairs today that Trump solves to be able to concentrate resources on the internal policies. It's just what he must do outside United States because of the politics that took place from 90s. They're way too heavy. America spends a lot of money, wastes a lot of money. Trump now tries to stop that process, but he wants to take away the money from the people that don't want to give it up. So, listening to you, I have seen a certain same scheme. I want to share that scheme with you. Maybe you can comment on that. Look, you and I agreed that Trump respects to powerful players. Iran included for Trump is a strong player, but there's Israel, which does not give Trump any opportunity to have a dialogue with Iran. Now look, there's Russia, strong player, and Israel is U.S. ally. There's a Russia, strong player. Trump wants to talk to them. He wants to have a strategic partnership. But there are allies, EU, that doesn't give him such an opportunity to have a dialogue with Russia. There's China, strong player that Trump wants to have compete with them, not to fight. But at the same time, he's got South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and Philippines that don't let him do so. So the problem is in the allies. What do you think?
No, the allies are very disruptive, I think, across many regions. I don't know if you're going to see a real peace evolve in Europe and Ukraine, and it could easily extend into although I don't see a threat in the immediate future of Russia expanding into Western Europe, but I do see there's a potential that it could expand in the region, and partially that is and it's not all. You already see a splintering within Europe going on. You see, and you've got even Merz, who's in one way wanting to have a dialogue with Putin, and Meloni in Italy as well. And of course, you have Fico and Orban, which have been always open to dialogue with Russia. So and they realize that the energy is very critical to the importance for their economies. But you've got a lot of leadership, especially the UK, Starmer and van der Leyen and whoever they call their foreign minister, are very disruptive. And I don't know if we can really see I think they're going to continue to be disruptive until we see new leadership in many of the different Western European countries, unfortunately. But and I wouldn't say an overthrow, but through electoral things, their popularity is at rock bottoms, and I think politically there's a realization that there needs to be more of an open dialogue, and as well. And I also see the U.S. and Trump pulling back from Europe, pulling back from many of the 700 plus bases we have around the world. So I think that's important too. He knows that they're overextended. He knows it's difficult to address his domestic policies while he's overextended internationally, but he also realized he wants to show strength internationally as well, and play a dialogue on that. I do think he overestimates our own strength, but I think he realizes it needs to be developed as well.